Imagine, if you will, a large family gathered together for Sunday dinner. It's a little chaotic, with everyone talking and laughing and sharing stories. And in the midst of this chaos, the father receives a phone call and abruptly leaves the table. Everyone waits anxiously to see what's happened. When he returns, he announces they have a kidney. This is a story I've become very familiar with, working with transplant patients for the last year and a half. This is a moment that over 120,000 waitlist candidates anticipate as they wait for an organ transplant. Organ donation has been a controversial subject since it began, and today I would like to share with you the myths and realities of organ donation, as well as the process that patients go through to get on the waiting list and how the system works as a whole. Let's go over some of the common myths and realities of organ donation. Something you might hear people talk about in relation to organ donor cards is that if they become an organ donor, medical professionals won't try to save their life because they'll want their organs. The truth is that organs are scarce. The number of organs available is far less than the number of patients waiting for them. According to Donate Life America, every 10 minutes another name is added to the National Organ Transplant waiting list. And on average, 18 people die each day waiting for an organ. However, legally, medical professionals can only breach the topic of organ donation when one of two things occur. One, the patient has been already declared brain dead. Then they can approach the family and talk about donation. Or, if a patient is a registered organ donor, if they've made their wishes known and death is imminent, they can then discuss what happens after that patient dies. Another myth that you might have heard people talk about is that if a celebrity, politician, or famous person is on the list, they'll receive priority over other patients. This is not the case. Patients are ranked on a waiting list according to specific criteria that's developed in order to ensure that the patient who is most in need of a transplant to save their life is the next person to get one. The United Network for Organ Sharing uses the following criteria. They look at the severity of the illness, and the specific measures used to determine this will vary for the organ. They look at the patient's time spent on the waiting list. The longer time you've been on the list, the higher you are. Blood type and other antibodies have to be looked at in order to match organs. And then there's other important medical information, such as other conditions a patient might have, or other comorbidities that determine where they are on the list. According to the UPMC kidney transplant website, the average time waiting for a kidney in Pittsburgh is a little over 27 months, and this is compared to 53 months as the national average. Now, in my experience working with transplant patients, I've seen people who got on the list on a Sunday and on Tuesday received their first call that an organ was available, while others have been on for months and received multiple calls and are still waiting for the right organ. It all depends on the status of their medical condition. Those who were sickest were those who had the transplants. Now that I've covered some of the main myths regarding organ donation, let's look at the process to get on the infamous list. First, the patient has to be evaluated to see if they're eligible for a transplant. So each hospital system has their own specific criteria that they look at to see if someone is a possible candidate for transplantation. But overall, there's about a week to 2 week long process where patients have appointments, have tests done, assessments with physicians. Lots of different things are looked into as far as their health goes, their finances, and their supports to see if they are an appropriate candidate. So the severity of their disease is considered. Their other body systems are looked at to ensure that they can tolerate a transplant. Their psychosocial support is considered, as well as behavioral health issues. And finally, during this evaluation process, it's even ensured that their insurance can cover the transplant. If the results of all these assessments indicate that someone is a potential candidate, then their case is presented to a board who determines to put them on the list or to reject them. Once a person is on the list, their wait begins, and they have to wait for multiple organizations to work together to bring an organ to a hospital to transplant. So one of the organizations that I've already mentioned is the United Network for Organ Sharing, or UNOS. This is a private, nonprofit organization that has a contract with the federal government to manage the organ transplant system on a national level. When an organ becomes available, UNOS is notified. On a local level, we have organ procurement organizations, or OPOs. Now, the U.S. is divided into different regions, and the regions each have their own OPO. For Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Virginia, their OPO is named CORE. So if an organ becomes available, the region that it's in gets first priority. And so the OPO looks in that region at the sickest patient and then offers it to that hospital. Once the OPO offers the organ to the hospital, the surgeon either accepts it or rejects it based on the status of the donor. If it's a heart and the person had heart disease, then they might reject it. But if they're healthy, then they might accept it. If they accept the organ, the hospital then informs the patient. And that is where the transplant process ends. The patient comes in, they receive the transplantation, and then the next person on the list goes to the top. Since the first successful kidney transplant in 1954, organ donation has been largely misunderstood. Its complicated and controversial nature makes it hard for some people to get a grasp on it. Hopefully today, you've gained a greater understanding of the myths versus realities of organ donation, the process of being put on the list, and how the system works as a whole.